All right, well, welcome everybody. Everybody, we'll give everyone a minute or two to file in, find a seat. Go ahead and take the middle. It's not like Southwest.
I heard that they're booking the middle seats on the planes now.
Yeah. Well, nobody wants to sit in them.
Yeah, no kidding.
All right, and so, all right, everybody, we're going to get started. There's a copy of the handout, which a PDF version, which you can download. If there's an issue with downloading it, you can chat, and I'll send you one or send me an email. There'll be a recording of this, which would be available for a nominal fee. I take PayPal, Stripe, Venmo. We can talk about it. So what I'd like to do is introduce Don Yoakum, who's going to talk about a subject that is probably not very important to real estate agents, right? Not high on the list, about how to get listings. And Don's a good one to have talk about this. He and I worked together. In fact, I realized we've worked at more offices than we originally thought. But Don at one time had 10 Keller Williams offices, including Cupertino and Palo Alto, which I worked at. I also worked, by the way, in Santa Rosa and Petaluma. I would just throw that up. Right, it's a small world. Arlene Moretti, Tony Rossi,
Sure.
Anyhow. So, and while Don was at Keller Williams, he helped develop some of the top teams in the United States, top agents in the United States, knows a thing or two about helping people get their business going, has a coaching program right now, and he's going to share the inside secrets on how to list homes that you never heard before. Take good notes, and I'm going to turn it over to Don.
Well, thanks, Mike. And so I do believe that our audience will find this useful, especially during these times with such extraordinarily tight market. Many of you may have even heard this term, which is listers last. And that is what they're referring to there, is that listers will last in the business, whereas buyer agents have a difficult time establishing a foundation. The nice thing about working with buyers, which often many people do early in their careers, is you're placing people in homes that they will later sell. And so it's a pretty natural thing to start as a buyer agent and then evolve into a stronger listing agent. That being said, I would suggest to you that most people do not embark on being listing agents soon enough. There are so many advantages to being a listing agent, and that's actually how I will begin my presentation. Oh, how about if I go the other way? I got to get you guys back up. Doesn't work too well if you start at the end. And so we'll start there. So what are the advantages of listing property? Number one, the NAR would tell you that the time involved to make a sale with a listing versus a buyer is substantially less. And you also have the advantage of having hopefully an exclusive right to sell. So you're contractually have your client committed in a contractual relationship that will ensure that you get a commission, whether you bring the buyer or one of your cooperative agents does. And it's just, it's hard to say what the difference is these days. That difference might even be more dramatic, because when you're representing buyers, oftentimes you're in a competing situation, being beat out on several properties. Sometimes that even causes you to lose a relationship with the buyer because they think it's your fault, in spite of the fact that there's 10 other offers, some of which are cash, which is, of course, quite difficult to compete with. But time leverage is numero uno. The other is that sellers don't typically become homeless after they sell their property. They will often buy a new home, and at least a significant percentage of the time, they will do so in your own market. So you'll get 2 sales out of that. Even if they do relocate, they will often move to a market where they will also purchase, and then you get a referral fee. and establish a referral relationship with another agent outside of your market. And through the process of having a listing, even if it's just the sign in the yard, you're going to be doing marketing that is going to generate yet more activity. It's often been said that one listing properly marketed should be worth at least another sale. And that's not counting the sale of the buy purchase from that particular client. So lots of reasons why you should be a strong listing agent, and we're going to show you how to become one momentarily. Here are some different listing sources. These are not all the sources, but these are more than enough. What I would suggest to you is that you will find 2 or 3 different ways of getting the majority of your listings, and you want to go really deep with that. But I'm going to go through each and every one of these so that you can see what best resonates with you. There are a couple that I think all of us should be doing, like sphere of influence and past clients. And then there are other that may or may not be a fit for you based on your behavior and your goals in the business. So first one is your sphere and past clients. We have a program where when I bring on an apprentice that I'm coaching, I will require actually that they come up and build a initial database of at least 120 people. These don't need to be best friends. They can be very casual acquaintances, but you have some contact information on them and you've had some interaction. That interaction may even be through a friend or relative, but enough so that they might recognize your name or your face if you were to see them in a coffee shop. And what you're going to look to do is start communicating with them on a quarterly basis personally. So personally means by phone or in person. And the way that I do the math is you take 120 people and you divide that by 60 working days in a quarter, 20 a month, and so you call 2 people a day. And that will enable a nice rotation, and you call as a real estate resource. So you would call somebody and just check in with them and see if there's anything that they need. They're only going to move about every 7 to 10 years, so more likely they would need something to maintain their home, maybe a painter, plumber, roofer, landscaper. And so that's a great way for you to stay in touch with them. So the idea here is that you come as a place from a place of contribution as a real estate resource, and you're going to become the realtor of choice. The other thing a lot of people do successfully is some type of electronic update about the market. They can do that in the form of an email, a newsletter, a blog, but some kind of monthly real estate update is certainly appropriate to your sphere and past clients. And on a quarterly basis, I really encourage you to invite them to events. So it's pretty difficult, especially when you're new in the business, to pull off a client appreciation event. In fact, you may not have many clients to appreciate at this point. So what I recommend you do with your sphere of influence and whatever few past clients that you do have is to invite them to a local event that you promote. And so I have a particular strategy where we will get behind an event and you'll send out a email communication to your sphere of at least 120. You will have purchased maybe a half a dozen tickets to the event, and you just encourage the first people that reach out to you, give them a free ticket. And this is not a really expensive thing. Usually choose an event that has tickets that might cost 10 to 20, maybe $25 at the most. And it creates some nice client interaction. And then of course you do see those folks at the event. You encourage your affiliate partners to do the same thing to the same events. And so you invite and you actually introduce your clients to the other affiliates that you're aligned with, and they do the same for you. And when you do engage, you know, I was coaching an agent earlier this week actually, and he says, well, do you have a script? And I had been role playing with him, and he did actually pretty well after a couple shots. And I says, you know, I don't like a written script because I don't want people to be robotic. And so what I do want you to do, however, is I want you to just come to your real estate community as a real estate resource and then ask great questions. So what are great questions? I like asking questions around services that would be trigger events for selling a home. Like, do you need a painter, a landscaper, a tree trimmer, you know, all those things that people do right in preparation for selling a home. But there are other questions that you ask. I often will coach my agents on how to engage in a real estate investment conversation. You know, you would ask your client if real estate is part of their investment retirement strategy, and if so, what does that look like? And have they owned properties in the past, and did they manage them? And what type of property was it? Was it single family home, duplex, fourplex, condominiums, second homes, whatever? And then ask them about their experience. Did they manage it themselves? And then in a perfect world, you would have them tell you that, you know, they have a particular goal. Maybe by the time they're 60 years old, they want to have 5 properties free and clear of a certain type. And then you would, based on the age that they're at, you would help put them on that trajectory. And what you can do in that process is where listing comes in is that a lot of times, especially like in the last 7-8 years, we've had this unbelievable appreciation. So sometimes what happens is you'll have one property that maybe goes up, like in your guys' area, as much as $500,000 or $1 million or more. And so it's got this tremendous equity position. And what you do is you have them sell that home and then exchange into 2 or 3 more. Just don't have them take on so much leverage that they go into a negative cash flow situation. You want them to have a nice buffer, but that can cause a whole series of transactions just because you asked the question and then help them execute that plan. I would say that if you aspire to be a great listing agent and if you want to dominate an area, you can't do it without going after expireds. Personally, this was my #1 source of business, and so I'm a real advocate of it. Today, if I were to do it again, however, I wouldn't choose as large a geographic area to do expires because it's extremely competitive and it's very time consuming. So, but if you will choose a market niche area where you're going and you're previewing properties, which I'm going to talk about more, is important. If you do like a zip code, usually a zip code comprises about 10,000 rooftops, so that's not such a big area where you'll have too many expireds, and we're going to approach those expireds in a multitude of ways, but at least go after the expireds that are in your home market. When you contact them through several channels, they're going to get, by the way, expireds are going to be bombarded with phone calls. It's not uncommon for them to get upwards of 20, 30 different agents calling them. So that can be challenging unless you're an absolute master on the phone. And so I encourage my agents to go to their door. You're going to be mailing to them, and you can also reach them through Facebook targeted marketing because we can now identify their IP address to their home address. There's just lots of creative things that you can do. The point is you want to come to them in a variety of ways, ideally at least 4. And what will happen with these expireds is they're going to be bombarded so much initially that sometimes they'll just catch their breath and push everybody off. But invariably, they were on the market for a reason. And so you want to determine if that reason is still valid for them. So for example, when I call an expired, one of the very first questions I'll ask is I'll call up and I'll say, hi, I'm calling about your home that's been for sale at 234 Timberlake Lane. I'm interested in knowing if you'd still like to sell it. And you know, they, depending on how many calls they've gotten at that point, they may or may not respond affirmatively, but let's say they say, well, sure. And I'll say, well, great. May I ask, when you do sell your property, where will you be going? And what I'm doing with that question is first of all, I want to see how attached they are to the original vision. And that's going to tell me how serious they are about getting their home sold. Now, if the home is expired in this environment, that should be a pretty good indication that the property was probably overpriced. So in most cases, not only are you going to need to list the property, but you're going to need to get a price reduction or at least get the home staged properly and so forth, because it's usually, the reason why a property expires is one of just a very few things. A, it's overpriced. B, it was not staged properly. Or C, there was not appropriate access to the property. And that encompasses at least 80, maybe 90% of whether a home will sell or not. Now, there obviously are things that you can do in the marketing of an expired that we can go a little deeper on, but you've got to get those three things right. And here's one of the things that you'll run into when you're talking to an expired, if you have not previewed their home or shown the home, they're going to call you out on that oftentimes. And so I encourage, that's why I really suggest that you work a small geographic area so that you have the ability to either show or preview the listings. And that will make it so that you don't have to stumble when that question is asked. And that will give you a leg up on your competitors as well. All right, so for sale by owners, this was interestingly one that I found pretty challenging. Being a driver personality, one of the things that is difficult for me when I feel like I'm either being taken advantage of or being taken for granted. And FSBOs don't have an overly high opinion of most realtors. And so it was challenging for me in this regard. But today, there's actually some amazing tools for sale by owners. And I'm going to tell you about one of them. But one thing that a lot of people don't consider when it comes to for sale by owners is that actually a lender can be an incredible strategic partner in the effort of getting a for sale by owner. And the reason why I say that is while for sale by owners are trying to avoid the realtors and sell their home, right? They actually need the lender 70% of the time, statistically. And so when a lender calls a for sale by owner, it's a completely different conversation. And so you can, if you will get the information to your lender, when a lender calls, they're actually very friendly to them. As a matter of fact, remember, when that for sale by owner sells their home, they're probably going to buy a home as well. So that's yet another reason for the lender to call them, is they can do the loan on the purchase. But what the lender can do is offer free marketing services to them, pre-qualify any leads, make sure that the for sale by owner doesn't get in a contract where people tie them up and then can't perform. And then what the lender does is kind of maintain the relationship for you. And so that is absolutely one of the conditions that I encourage you to make in your lender selection is, are you willing and open to working for sale by owners with me? And if they're not, I would choose another lender. Next thing is utilize home bids, and we can get you access. Mike can get you the information on it. And it is a fantastic service that creates a competitive bid situation for sale by owners. You can make an offering to them where it is a buyer paid commission, so you can still get a full commission, but it's paid by the buyer instead of them. And so if you have not already, you should look into that service for sure. I've got several agents that are just absolutely crushing it with that system. And offer to connect these for sale by owners to future resources. So one of the things that agents fail to do is they'll talk to a for sale by owner will put them off, okay? And then they don't ask where the people are going, because remember, as a buyer, you are not paying the commission. And so oftentimes, while a seller will not allow you to list their home, they're completely fine with you connecting them to a realtor where they're relocating, and then you can generate a referral fee, which can be a material amount. But maybe even more importantly, what happens is if their home doesn't sell, and I know in a lot of cases they have been, the market is going to shift though, and so in the not too distant future, a lot of cases they won't be selling. Well, that realtor in that area will start advocating for you for them to list their home with you, especially if you have gotten them the referral. So don't utilize that. And it's not just the realtor. Other services that you could connect the for sale by owner to would be things that they need to do to prep their home for sale. You can also have those people advocating for you. I'm referring to the painters, the landscapers, tree trimmers, etc. All right, this is a really fun one, and this is one that most people don't think of, but man, the timing for this one is incredible right now for rents. So what I'm talking about is a property that is for rent today. Now, think about this for a second. This person is advertising their home for rent, which means it's vacant. Okay, now, why is it vacant? Could be that they just had a tenant problem. And in the state of California, there are all kinds of things protecting tenants from evictions and so forth. So do they actually really want to take the risk of putting another tenant in there that isn't going to pay and then they can't evict them? And also, the timing is really amazing because think about where we are in the market cycle. We have been in an appreciating market roughly since late 2011, early 2012. So we're overdue for a correction. Oftentimes when I'm having a conversation with an investor that has a property for rent, I will ask them where they think we are in the market cycle. And I'll say, if this was a 9-inning baseball game, what inning would you say that we're in right now? And most investors are savvy enough to know that we're in the 9th inning. We might even be in extra innings, actually. But the point is that if they were to sell now, they'd be selling at the absolute top of the market. And so that is a conversation that you can have and kind of help them self-discover that now would be a great time for them to sell. The other piece of that is you're going to have people that just absolutely won't want to sell. So then what you're going to want to do is switch the conversation to an investment conversation. Okay, so they own this rental property or investment property. Would they like to own others? And so what do they have as a strategic plan for their portfolio? Maybe they'll reveal to you how many properties they have today, how many they'd like to have in the future, what the composition, is that going to be single family, duplex, fourplex, whatever, what their appetite for is in terms of leverage. And essentially what you're trying to find out is, can I be an agent that looks for properties that you would be interested in adding to your portfolio, right? So, but before I leave this one, I just want to give you the script, which is I just call people up and I just say, hi, I'm calling about your 3-bedroom that you have for rent in Cupertino. And actually, I actually name the street. So I'm calling about your 3-bedroom on Timberlake Lane. And they'll say, yes, how can I help you? At this point, they think that you're a potential tenant. And I simply say, I am just curious, if you don't find a tenant that you'd be happy with, would you be open to selling your home? Pretty simple. And they will usually say yes or no. And if they say no, I say, fair enough. So first validate what they say. And then I would say, have you owned this property for long? And then I lead that into a market cycle conversation. And ultimately, again, just like with your sphere of influence, you want to be a real estate resource. And so that means, if you're calling them, it's because they're managing their property independently. Would they like to be connected with a reliable property manager? Or if they are managing themselves, do they need something in order to get this property fully prepped for market? And so that gives you a way of adding value and building on the relationship. Here's another super underutilized way of getting listings, professional affiliates. This is a personal favorite of mine, actually. And the ones I want you to focus on first are the trigger events for listing a home. So what does somebody do right before they list a home for sale? They paint it, they landscape it, they redo the flooring, they remodel it, they trim the trees, okay? Think of these things that people will do. They hire a handyman right before they're going to put their home on the market. Sometimes, by the way, they'll do a garage sale. And so just think about those things and then align yourself with all of the professionals that do those things. And so, and you need to train those affiliates to ask the magic question, which is, may I ask you why you are painting your home? You know, because if you're preparing it for sale, we'll certainly use a quality paint, but we may not want to use the most expensive one. And we'll do a fine job, but maybe not go to the same detail and expense as if you tell me you're going to be here for 10 years. So if you will train those affiliates to ask that question, which is why they've hired them, then that will often bubble up the referrals. And what you're going to find with trigger event activities is usually 20 to 25% of the time it's because they're preparing it for sale. I just spoke about asking the questions to uncover those opportunities. I think, and I just want to cover the professional affiliates are the trigger events, but there's another class of professionals that I want you to keep in mind in this regard. And that is CPA, financial advisor, attorneys, insurance brokers, and lenders. You do need to train them to ask a question, but the question is slightly different. So one of the things that people overlook is that, for example, a CPA has average CPA has 500 clients, and they're usually homeowners. And so if people move every 10 years, that CPA has a client listing their home for sale every single week, right? 500 divided by 10 is 50, 52 weeks in a year. And so the problem is that the way that a CPA behaves is they will usually ask you if you bought or sold a home in the last tax year because they're trying to prepare your current taxes. What you've got to train your CPA to do is ask proactively, do you plan to buy or sell a home in the coming tax year? Because if the CPA were going to do anything to give them guidance on how to execute a tax deferred exchange or comply with the personal residence exclusion, they need to know about the event before it occurs. And so you train them to ask that question. And so where for the vendor, it is, may I ask what prompted you to do this work? For the professional class affiliate, it is, do you plan to buy or sell a home in the coming year? Now, if they get somebody that says yes, then how do they introduce? Okay, what they do not do is give your business card. That is an almost certain way to have that referral fall through the cracks. And also, actually, I want you to train them to not think of it as a referral, but just think of it as an introduction. A referral, when you ask someone to refer you, it implies an endorsement, and it's a level of endorsement that professionals may or may not be comfortable in providing for you. However, an introduction infers that it's just a contact and they should still do their due diligence. And that's actually what you want. You just want them to introduce you, and you want them to introduce you by three-way text, which then gives you the person's phone number, okay? And you're going to do this the same way, especially when you're introducing vendors, because it enables you to monitor the response rate of those vendors. And then with affiliates, by the way, one of the ways you might be saying, well, how am I possibly going to influence a CPA to introduce me over the other 12 realtors they're doing tax returns for? The way you do it is you find out what referral relationships that they have and where they're lacking. So for example, for a CPA, good sources are financial advisors. I ran a mastermind that included a financial advisor that had introduced his CPA over 300 times in a 20-year span. So if you were the realtor that made that connection, you don't have to be a mega producer because you created enough equity in that relationship through that connection and didn't cost you a thing. This is a big one right at the moment because there are not very many homes on the market. So virtually all the homes that would fit the parameters of your buyers are off market right now. Statistically, if people sell every 10 years, that means 9 out of 10 homes would not be on the market, right? Well, there's a way for you to reach those homes. And I just want to point out, not only we have a tight market, but it's kind of like the perfect storm because we're also coming up on the holidays and people don't like having their homes on the holidays either. And so it will be even more tight because of that. And so a little strategy that I coach my agents to do is it's a buyer letter. What I do is I take up one of my buyers that I get pre-approved, and I actually do this in conjunction with my lender, and we have them articulate precisely what they're looking for. So I want to buy in this neighborhood, this many bedroom and baths, this much square footage, this price, and then I want to incorporate that all into a personal letter that I will mail to all of the homes in that area that fit those parameters, which of course we can get from the tax rolls, right, through our title company resource. And this gets a phenomenal response if you do it in the right way. The way it's important you hand address the envelopes. There's no return address. Each letter is personalized. It's signed with a thick blue pen. And of course, you're very specific with the verbiage in the letter itself. And this can actually, I was working with an agent that was getting a listing every month just from this one strategy. And when you do this, it endears your buyers to you, right? Because they can be getting frustrated that you're not finding them a home and you're saying, well, hey, I'm going to pursue off-market properties for you, not just wait for the ones that come on the MLS. And I just mentioned we do that through personalized communication versus via snail mail. All right, geographic farming. This used to be thought of as kind of the old-fashioned way of doing business. And back in the day, it's a very time-tested way of going. I personally think it's one of the absolute best ways to go. One of the reasons is because NAR will tell you, that's an acronym for National Association of Realtors, that the number one reason people will choose you is because of trust. Number two is local market knowledge. And when you choose a geographic farm and you know it well, it gives you a level of authority and knowledge that lends you a lot of credibility. And so I'm a super fan of geographic farming, and that is a great way to get listings. I maintained a geographic farm early in my career, and at one point maintained over a 40% market share in that same market. And it does a bunch of things for you. Number one, when you have multiple channels that you go into a farming area, what I mean by multiple channels is you are mailing, you're calling, you're door knocking, you're doing open houses, you are showing up in their Facebook news feed, which we can target right to, as I said, that address because we know their IP address. It creates a magnified outcome for every single channel that you do, meaning by doing more channels, each channel becomes more effective. The other thing that is going to happen if you choose your farm, and I strongly recommend that you choose a farm that's within 15 minutes of where you live, it gets you a quality of life. Instead of driving all over the metro area, you're doing the majority of business in this small little neighborhood. And so from a time perspective, just like listings gain you leverage, geographic farming gains you leverage because you're not having to travel or commute, fight traffic and so forth in order to get your business. The other thing it does is it creates a security for you, and you're going to know that you have secured yourself when you get this call that says, "Hi, Don, we're calling because we see your signs all over the neighborhood, and we were just wondering if you'd come by and tell us what our home is worth. Okay, and I did get those calls, and it is really a nice call to get because there's no competition, and you go out and you've already established credibility in your marketplace, and you get to list the property. So, but that doesn't happen by spreading yourself too thin. You never get that phone call. So I'm just going to wrap up with this quote, which is, don't be a secret agent. The consumer perceives the market leader to be the realtor with the most signs in the neighborhood. And even in the age of high tech, it still comes down to this. The neighbors are going to think that you're a player if your signs are out, and I hope that they will be. And so, Mike, that concludes my presentation on listing, and I'm very happy to take any and all questions at this point, and or we can have a discussion and go a little deeper on any of these slides.
You hear that, people? Any and all questions. This is a dangerous group to throw that out.
That's okay. I'll take it.
They're busy typing up their questions right now. We see one.
Okay.
That it's just a thank you. So
okay.
Thank you for the thank you.
Yeah. So
anybody have any specific questions on how to do something?
What I'll do while they're working on their questions, by the way, you get extra points for asking questions. And another, if you have been taking notes in this presentation, one of the things that I feel very strongly about is that people will judge you by the quality of questions that you ask. And so one of the things that I tell my agents when they go to a listing presentation is that if you are talking more than the client, shut up. Okay, you're talking too much. And the way that you come to a listing presentation with a consultative approach is by asking great questions. So what are some great questions that you're going to ask in a listing presentation? First of all, there's questions that you would ask before the appointment. For example, you know, I told you when I called on expireds, I would ask them, do they still want to sell their home? When they do sell, where are they going? And then what is taking them there? And when do they need to be there? So these are all questions that are helping you to determine their sense of urgency, right? And so then based upon if they're for sale by owner or expired, or if they have past experiences with realtors, one of the things when you first get to a listing appointment, what you want to do is also get them selling you versus you selling them. And what I mean by that is you walk into the home and then you want to take control. You set your things down at the place where you're going to want to present to them. And then you say, would you be so kind to just give me a tour of your home as though I am the buyer? And you get them in this mode of selling you on their place, okay? And I want you to be a buyer, meaning I want you to be enthused about their property. One of the ways that they're going to determine whether or not they're going to list with you is if they think, A, that you're excited about their home, that you like their home, right? Remember, this is a home they chose, so they obviously like it. And if you believe you can get the job done. And they are going to, it was funny because a lot of the time that I sold in the 90s, we had 18 to 24 months of inventory, right? And of course, I would go into these presentations and I had my checklist of all the things I would do. But I will tell you far and away that the number one reason why someone would choose me is because they would look across the table and determine if I believed I could get the home sold. And if they believed that I believed I could get the job done, they gave me the listing. It really didn't matter what I said, okay? But to establish my professionalism, to establish my interest in serving their needs, I asked a lot of great questions. One of my favorite questions to ask, by the way, is whether or not they've sold a home before. And then if they say yes, I would say, well, tell me about that experience. What was it that you liked about what the agent did? And then they will tell you. And then when they do, what I want you to say is, okay, so here's what I heard you say, and it makes perfect sense that you would like that. So that sounds like a pretty good agent. Now, if there's anything that agent could have done to make that a better experience, what would it be? Okay, and if you'll just ask those two questions, by the way, you're going to be head and shoulders above your competition, right? Now, what I do want you to also notice is throughout all of these tips on how to go get listings and so forth, I've never said anything about what I'm going to actually do, right? I told you the three most important things is price, staging, and access, right? But I'm going to give you one other little one, but that is not near as important as really being genuinely interested in them and asking great questions. So before I do that though, Mike, do we have any questions yet?
Yes, we're starting to get a few.
Okay.
If Dimitri wants to know if you could expand on what works best with expired scripts, methods, etc., etc. That can be done in like in a minute, I would think.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, so expireds, by the way, expireds are not for the faint of heart, okay? So I told you that expireds were my #1 source of business, and it's because I'm a driver personality, and I wouldn't say that I'm fearless, but I'm certainly willing to move forward in spite of whatever trepidations that I might have, okay? So if I'm calling you, so Mike, do you want to, and Mike, you can be a little bit ornery. You know what it's like to call an expired. Why don't you role play with me for just a moment, okay?
Sure.
So ring, ring, ring.
Hello.
Hi, is this Mike?
Yes.
Hi, Mike, this is Don Yoakum. I'm calling you about your home that you've had for sale on Timberlake Lane.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I was just wondering, I'm sure you know it's been taken off the market, and I was just wondering if you'd still like to sell your home.
I would like to sell it if I could get my price.
Fair enough. And what do you consider your price to be?
Well, the price that I listed it at, but I get a lot of calls from real estate agents. So, what is it that you're going to do that's different from what my agent did? Tell me what's the difference?
Well, in order to answer that question, I'd have to know what your agent did or did not do, of course. But I can share with you based on past experience. I'm calling because I've been very successful in selling other homes that other agents could not get sold, right? And sadly, while there are some good agents out there besides myself, there are many that will tie you up in a listing and just hope the other agents will do the job of getting it sold. That is not a position that I'll put you in. So, was there anything that your agent did that was good? Can you share that with me?
Well, he put it on the MLS, had a virtual tour, did open houses. So, do you have a buyer now for my house?
Well, I'm familiar with your home, by the way, and I do work with a number of buyers. I've not shown your property, and so I can't say with certainty that one of my buyers would be ready to buy your home. But what I can tell you is I deploy a strategy in representing a client that exposes you to 100% of the agents that have represented even one buyer in your market in the last 12 months. So in other words, when I list a property, I do not just leave it in the MLS or do an occasional open house here or there. One of the things that may be of interest to you is that while there are over 12,000 agents in our multiple listing service in this metro area, there are only 37 of us that have sold a home similar to yours in your area in the last year. But what I do when I bring a property to the market after we've properly positioned it, staged it, prepared the marketing, is I personally reach out to every single one of those 37 people. And what I'm trying to do, Mike, is create a situation so that when your property hits the market, we've already got a few agents with their clients that are interested in your home, and it creates a flurry of activity, because the way that you get your price, especially get your price and maybe even over your price, is when we create a bidding situation. And that's how we create the best possible chance of doing that. Now, I'll tell you, connecting with 37 agents by phone is a lot of work. And so a lot of people don't usually do that. I suspect your agent probably didn't. As a matter of fact, I know they didn't, because I'm one of those agents and they didn't call me about your listing. Okay, but that's an example of one thing that I would do. But let's just back up for a second. What is it that prompted you to sell your home in the first place?
Oh, just seemed like a good time to sell, get the most money,
Well, you're certainly wise in that regard. Sounds like you're pretty familiar with market cycles.
Yes.
Yeah. And have you lived in the Bay Area long?
No, just since 1990.
No, that's pretty long. And actually 1990 was a year that we went into recession, coincidentally, but I would say that we're in the equivalent of 1990 right now, actually. Yeah. And we're also probably pretty close to 2006, if you remember that year. And so selling your home and capturing your profits at the top, your timing is exquisite. But if we do sell your home, what will you do then?
Move to Nevada.
You're not the only one, boy.
Fight off the tarantulas.
Right? Isn't that the thing? I think people are kind of fed up with a number of things in California, not to mention the taxes. But gosh, Mike, you sound like you want to take advantage of where we are with this market timing. Obviously, if you've been there since 1990, you're going to make an enormous profit on your home. And I'd love to help you be able to do that. But for me to really effectively tell you what it's going to take to get your home sold, I'm going to need to see it, because the price is part of the equation, but then the staging of the home is another valuable piece. And I'd like for you to be able to meet me personally. Today, it's Thursday, right? How is your time tomorrow?
Okay.
Okay. And what would be a convenient time for us to meet tomorrow?
2 o'clock. How about that?
Okay, that works. Great. And is it just yourself or you and your wife?
Just myself.
Okay, perfect. Wonderful. All right. Well, then I will prepare to meet you tomorrow at 2 o'clock. Thank you so much for your time.
Sounds good.
Okay.
Good.
So, for that person that asked for the script, obviously, that's a long conversation, but and I will tell you guys that Mike was a little nicer than most expireds. But no matter how ornery they are, as a matter of fact, he did try to be ornery. I want you to notice in the beginning, and you just don't take that bait, okay? You stay very matter of fact, very level-headed, very servant-oriented. You ask a lot of questions, and if you can get through that first 30 seconds or so, their blood pressure will start to come down, and then you can start to have a conversation, which is what happened, right? How did that feel on your end, Mike?
Good. I mean, I didn't really want to ask all the ornery questions that I have in my head, right? Like, did you show it? No. Well, then how could you have a buyer if you didn't show it? If you had a buyer, then why didn't you show it? Obviously you don't have a buyer. All the agents are saying that. Yeah. I mean, I've been on those calls, but
yeah, exactly.
they're, having me hang up quickly wouldn't necessarily help anybody. Rick has a question about what would be the best marketing dollar value if you were going to return on investment, thrifty. What would you say for getting listings?
The buyer letter.
Buyer
I
letter?
would, yeah,
Yeah. You have a
yeah,
buyer for your home?
yeah.
Yeah. Circle prospecting, maybe type of a buyer for your home, or just a buyer for your home?
Well, yeah. I mean, there's two types of going for listings, right? There's you spend money doing something, mailing a letter,
Yeah.
doing a Facebook ad, or you use your time. Like you can call around a listing that you just sold. I just sold one of your neighbor's home. I just sold your neighbor's home. We have generated enormous buyer interest, however, and matter of fact, I had 6 offers on this home. We could only take the offer from one, of course. By chance, are you or somebody that you know looking to sell their home, right? So that's using your time instead of your money. And what you can find is in the beginning of your business, you're going to lean towards activities that are more time consuming, less costly. And then as you begin to generate commissions and a recurring stream of income, you're going to shift that pendulum. So maybe it's 70-30. So 70% prospecting, 30% ad spend. Eventually, you want to flip it around and you want 70% is by referral or ad spend, and then just 30% is prospecting, right? So you want to be able to gain more and more leverage in your business so you can keep scaling up to greater and greater volume. But the buyer letter is great. Facebook marketing is really good too. If you're going to do Facebook marketing, make sure that you've got a digital marketer that can also determine whether or not, like, someone has visited recently Zillow or Realtor.com. They're able to target people in that manner. One of the things I find on Facebook marketing is that it can be really good for listings because they're usually a little earlier in the cycle than they are on Zillow. Usually when people are going to Zillow, they're a little later in the cycle, and they're usually a buyer. Is a typical experience.
If an agent hadn't actually sold any properties in the area, could they use the we have recently, the we as in we realtors, we the real estate business, or a property
Yeah,
recently sold?
sure.
Yeah.
Anybody, and by the way, you can say there's 37 agents that have sold a property in your geographic area in the last 12 months, and I'm going to personally contact each and every one of them.
Yeah.
I didn't say I sold one of them. I was one of them.
Right. Yeah. One of the things I used to go to the other properties in the neighborhood that were listed, and the agents would leave their stack of business cards, and I would scan them with my phone, and then I had a list of all the agents that are showing property in the area. And
Yeah.
just as Paul wants to know, what do you typically charge for a listing, and what perks do you normally include in your fee?
Well, that is actually with mixed brokerages. We're really not supposed to be talking about fees, but the industry standard, I think that most people will tell you, is somewhere between 5 and 6%, and sometimes people will discount that commission if they double in the property. And some people have been taking more on the listing side than on the buy side just because they can. And so you can look though in the MLS and you can see what's offered to the buyer agent, and usually it's about 2.5%. But you can look at each listing and compare. And so just be aware that if you do something less than that, you're not going to get as much buyer demand, and price is a function of supply and demand, and you want to get as many buyers there from as many agents as you possibly can. So in other words, a percent saved in commission doesn't necessarily translate to a percent more in their pocket. They may have in fact given up 2 or 3% because they have less people showing their property. So you have to look at those trade-offs.
Let's see. Paul also would like to know how many homes you would consider a workable farm.
10,000.
10,000.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah, and if you're going to snail mail, that's the old traditional way, I usually just recommend just starting with 250. If you're mailing every month, I just recommend mailing 250, and then every 90 days increasing that by 250. So in 5 years, you'd be mailing to 5,000 of them. But these days, you can target those 10,000 rooftops with Facebook ads. Certainly, you can do open houses throughout that area. You can be door knocking and so forth. And you want to do those things around the listings that you get within that area. But I like choosing an area of 10,000 as my parameter. And that's not to say you're not going to do business outside of that. You certainly will. I'm just suggesting that you spend almost all of your marketing dollars within that rooftop area.
Colleen would want to know what would you say to clients in a listing presentation if you haven't sold real estate successfully in the past, a new agent on a listing appointment?
Okay, great question. And I would say all the same things that I did. Here's the thing, Colleen, is that if you are asking the questions, you're in control. If you ask good questions, then they're going to think you're competent, and they're never going to ask you if you're new. Okay, so I would assume that you would learn your market. So one of the things with a brand new agent, remember what I told you, the number 2 reason why someone is chosen is because of local market knowledge. It's not years in the business, okay? It's trust and then local market knowledge, all right? And there, incidentally, by the way, there's a lot of 10-year veterans that are crappy realtors. So what you can do once you choose your 10,000 rooftop area is you pull up every closed sale since January 1. I want you to drive every single one of those properties, okay? And not just look at them on the printout, because pictures, while they can say 1,000 words, they usually are just like Facebook photos. They're a little bit enhanced view of that property. You want to have the real view of the home. And so I want you to drive every close comp in that area. Then I want you to drive every pending. And then I want you to preview every available home. Okay, I want you to drive every expired. Okay, it takes, if you dedicate about 4 hours a week and you do that for 90 days, you're going to know that 10,000 rooftop area better than anyone else. Okay, and you're going to be able to weave some of that knowledge into your listing presentation. You know, your home is a lot like the home that recently sold over on Cypress. They had a really nice breakfast nook as well. Incidentally, that home sold for $278 per square foot. And, and so you just kind of drop those little bombs, right? And you're able to do that because you know your market better than anybody. So even if you're brand new, there's no reason why you can't be the most knowledgeable about current market values in 90 days. But it takes a little bit of work. So that's what you got to do.
Is it also possible that maybe the owner might be more concerned about the marketing plan and what you're going to actually do to sell the property than what other agents say about themselves?
Yeah, for sure. And the thing of it is, most agents do almost nothing to market a home.
Yeah.
Okay, so if you do something, you're already ahead of the crowd. And then if you reach out to the agents that have already established a recent track record of success, then you're way ahead of the crowd. Okay, and then if you get professional photos of their home and you ensure that the home is staged, and then you do this pre-marketing and you create the listing as an event, you know, it's now all of a sudden you have almost no competition. So it is ridiculously easy to outclass your competition. So the mere fact that you're new should not intimidate you, because if you're really diligent, you can immediately move to the front of the crowd. My first full year in the business, I closed 51 deals. So that you don't have to have 10 years of experience to be a top listing agent. Like I said early in my conversation, most people put that off way too long.
Rick asks
Right.
about marketing budget percentage-wise, more or less during, he's got several questions, more or less during leaner times. And of all the things, Facebook, letters, Zillow, which are the top ones that you would recommend?
Yeah, great questions. So what I attempt to get my clients to do is spend 10%. Not everybody does. Some spend a little more, but most spend less. And so 10% is a good sound amount. So if you're generating a $20,000 commission, you'd invest $2,000 in marketing. And usually you can generate a sale with about $1,000 in marketing, but for sure with two if you're doing it effectively. And it's a little tough to say on those other things because so much of how you're going to determine your marketing is based on your personality. And so you want to play to your strengths, to your niche. And then, you know what you want to really do is you want to find somebody that is doing what you want to do and copy them.
Yes.
Right?
R&D, rip off and duplicate.
That's exactly right.
Jennifer has her sphere of influence, she says, is her CPA is in San Diego. She has friends and insurance agents, etc., but most of them are at work or on LinkedIn, and she doesn't necessarily have their personal email. How do you leverage this? Is the question.
And this, I just realized I've got another Zoom I got to jump on here, but I will answer this question. What you do is you work with what you have, and then you try to get more information. So if you're connected with them on LinkedIn, send them a message to LinkedIn, and then just say, hey, you know, I wanted to send you a text, or just ask them for their number, right, or their email, and just meet. In other words, just meet them where they are, and then just try. I always try to make it a game when I'm calling my sphere to just add one piece of data in each communication. You know, if I don't have their email, get that. Or if I don't have their phone, to get that. If I don't have their home address, get that. Or if I don't know their owner status, get that. If I don't know their occupation, then that, right? Just try to get at least one new piece of data. But hey, I do need to go. I have some people waiting for me. I hope this has been helpful to you. And I did send this deck to Mike, so he has it. I think he put it up as a PDF, so you're welcome to make use of that. If you do have some success with some of these ideas, I'd love to hear from you. And with that, I got to run.
Thanks a lot, Don. Appreciate it.
You're very welcome. Have a good day.